My manager harassed me for months. He never expected what I did next. I still remembered my first day like it was frozen in time. The glass doors slid open, and I stepped inside, gripping my bag tighter than I needed to. My heart was racing, but I kept my face calm. This job wasn't just another opportunity. It was everything I had worked toward. My name is Tara Reynolds, and this is my story. The office felt bright and steady, filled with quiet focus. People moved with purpose, and a few offered polite smiles as I passed. It made me feel like I belonged, like I had finally made it somewhere that mattered. Then I met my manager. He walked toward me with confidence, his shoes tapping lightly against the floor. Welcome, he said, shaking my hand firmly. I've heard good things about you. I smiled. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. He held my hand a second longer than necessary before letting go. It was subtle, but I noticed. At first, I ignored it. Over the next few days, he kept showing up at my desk. Settling in okay? He would ask, leaning slightly closer than needed. Let me know if you need anything. I like to keep a close eye on new talent. I told myself it was normal. Supportive, even. But something didn't sit right. It was the way he watched me, not just my work, but me. And even though nothing had clearly crossed the line yet, I felt it. Something was off. At first, I tried to explain it away. Maybe he was just friendly. Maybe I wasn't used to this kind of attention in a workplace. I told myself not to overthink. I needed this job, and I didn't want to create problems where there weren't any. But the feeling didn't go away. It grew. You always look so sharp, he said one morning, standing beside my chair instead of across from my desk. His voice was low, almost too casual. I forced a small smile. Thanks. Another day, he leaned closer and said, You've got a way of standing out. Not everyone has that. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. Then the messages started. At first, they made sense. Can you check that file? Did you send the report? But soon they changed. What are you doing now? You're up late. You should relax more, maybe with company. I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. So I didn't. The next day at work, everything felt different. He didn't smile the same way. His tone was sharper. And when he pointed out a small mistake in front of others, it didn't feel like feedback. It felt like a warning. The pattern didn't take long to reveal itself. When I kept my distance, his attitude turned cold. When I stayed polite but firm, he found new ways to push. It was subtle enough that no one else seemed to notice, but clear enough that I couldn't ignore it. One afternoon, I finished a report I had worked on for hours. I reviewed every detail, checked every number, and even asked a coworker to look it over. It's solid, she said. You're good. That gave me confidence. But when he called me into his office, that confidence disappeared. He sat behind his desk, flipping through the pages slowly. His face showed nothing. Then he sighed. This is disappointing, he said. My stomach dropped. Can you tell me what needs fixing? He pointed at sections that weren't wrong. His tone stayed calm, but his words felt heavy. I expected better from you, he added. I nodded quietly and left. Later, I showed the same report to my coworker again. She frowned. There's nothing wrong with this. That was the moment something clicked. This wasn't about my work. It was about control. After that, everything started to feel heavier. I became more aware of him, where he was, who he was talking to, when he might walk past my desk. It wasn't fear exactly, but it was close. I started changing small habits. I avoided being alone in rooms where I knew he might come in. I timed my breaks differently. I kept my headphones nearby, even if I wasn't listening to anything. Still, he found ways. Got a minute? He would say, appearing beside me without warning. Those minutes always felt longer than they should. One afternoon in the break room, I walked in and heard two coworkers talking quietly. They stopped the second they saw me. One of them gave a quick smile, but it didn't feel natural. I caught his name before the silence. That stayed with me. Did they know something? Or was I just imagining it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, the comments, the looks, the way his tone changed when no one else was paying attention. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. The breaking point came during a team meeting. We were all seated around the table, laptops open, discussing upcoming changes. Then the topic shifted to promotions. My heart started beating faster. I had worked harder than ever. Late nights, extra tasks, perfect reports. I had done everything right. When the list was announced, I listened carefully. My name wasn't there. At first, I thought I misheard, but I didn't. The meeting ended, and I stayed behind. I wanted to ask about the promotion, I said, keeping my voice steady. He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. You're not ready. I frowned slightly. Can you explain what I need to improve? He smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Your attitude, he said. The word hit harder than anything else. I understood what he meant. It wasn't about performance, it was about control. I walked out of that room with something changing inside me. The fear was still there, but something else had taken its place, and it was stronger. That night, I sat on my bed in complete silence. My phone was in my hands, and my screen was filled with his messages. I scrolled slowly, reading each one again. This time, I didn't try to excuse anything. I didn't tell myself I misunderstood. I just saw it for what it was, a pattern, clear, repeated, intentional. For months, I had been reacting, trying to avoid problems, trying to stay professional, hoping things would stop. They hadn't. They had grown. I opened my notes app and started writing dates, times, what he said, where it happened. Then I started taking screenshots. Every message, every detail. I organized everything carefully. At first, it felt strange. Then, it felt powerful. For the first time, I wasn't just dealing with what was happening, I was preparing for what came next. The next morning, I walked into the office with a different mindset. Nothing around me had changed, but I wasn't just trying to get through the day anymore. I was paying attention. When he spoke, I noticed every detail, his tone, his timing, the way he adjusted his behavior depending on who was nearby. It was clear now. He knew exactly what he was doing. That realization didn't scare me anymore. It focused me. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. Another message from him. I looked at it for a moment before replying. This time, I kept it simple, professional, direct, nothing extra. His reply came quickly, short, cold, different. I stared at the screen for a second, then set my phone down. That reaction told me everything. He didn't like losing control, and for the first time, I realized something important. Control could shift. Over the next few days, my notes grew into something solid. What started as scattered details turned into a clear timeline. Messages, conversations, moments, all connected. When I looked at everything together, it told a story. Not a confusing one, a clear one. This wasn't random behavior. It was repeated. It was calculated. And it had been happening for months. For so long, I had doubted myself. Now, I wasn't imagining anything. I wasn't overreacting. I was seeing the truth. And once I saw it clearly, I couldn't ignore it anymore. That's when the idea fully formed. I didn't need to fight him directly. I needed to be smarter. And I was ready to be. Part two, by the time a full week passed, My notes no longer felt like random records, they felt like evidence. I sat at my desk one evening, long after most people had left, scrolling through everything I had saved. Messages, timestamps, written notes, each piece connected to another. It wasn't messy anymore. It was structured, clear, and honestly, a little shocking. I leaned back in my chair and whispered to myself, this is real. For months, I had questioned everything. Now, there was no room for doubt. The next step, though, that was harder. I knew I couldn't rush this. If I made one emotional move, it could all fall apart. He had been here longer. He knew the system, he knew how to act in front of others, so I had to be smarter. The next morning, I did something small but important. I asked HR a general question, not about him, not about me, just about workplace policies. What happens if someone feels uncomfortable with a manager's behavior? I asked calmly. They explained the process, clear, professional, structured, and most importantly, they took it seriously. That conversation stayed with me all day. It told me something I needed to hear. There was a path forward, and I wasn't as alone as I thought. While I was preparing quietly, his behavior didn't stop. If anything, it sharpened. It was like he could sense something had changed, even if he didn't know what. His tone became tighter. His patience seemed thinner. One morning, he stopped by my desk and dropped a file in front of me. I need this done by today, he said. I glanced at it. It was easily 2 days worth of work. That timeline might be difficult, I said carefully. He leaned slightly closer. I'm sure you'll figure it out. There was a pause. Then he added, if you're serious about growing here, the message was clear. I nodded. I'll do my best. And I did. But I also documented it, every unrealistic deadline, every comment that came with pressure. Later that afternoon, he corrected me in a meeting over something small that didn't affect anything. It wasn't about the mistake, it was about control. But this time, I didn't feel small, I felt aware. And awareness changed everything. That night, I reviewed everything again, the messages, the notes, the patterns. Um, there was more than enough now, but I still didn't move. Not yet. I needed to be sure everything was clear and organized. I didn't want anything to be dismissed as confusion or misunderstanding. So I built a timeline, step by step, first message, first comment, first shift in behavior, then the escalation, then the pressure, then the promotion incident. Seeing it laid out like that made everything stronger. It wasn't just a story, it was proof. I sat there for a long moment, staring at my screen. Then I said quietly, it's time. The next morning, I opened my email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second. Then I typed, I would like to schedule a confidential meeting. I didn't overthink it. I didn't rewrite it. I just sent it. And the moment I did, something inside me settled. The waiting was over. The meeting was scheduled for the next day. That night felt longer than usual. I kept thinking about what I would say, how I would say it, and what might happen after. There were so many unknowns, but one thing stayed clear in my mind. I had the truth, and that mattered. The next morning, I walked into work like any other day. He passed by my desk once, barely looking at me. For a moment, I wondered if he already knew, but I didn't let that thought grow. When the time came, I stood up and walked to the HR office. Each step felt steady. Inside the room, they greeted me calmly. Take your time, one of them said. So I did. I explained everything from the beginning. I didn't rush, I didn't exaggerate. I simply told the truth. Then I showed them the messages, the notes, the timeline. They listened carefully, asking questions when needed. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then one of them nodded slowly. Thank you for bringing this forward. they said. And in that moment, I knew something had shifted. After the meeting, I returned to my desk. Everything looked the same screens, the same voices, the same routine. But inside, everything felt different. I had spoken for months, I had carried everything alone. Now, I wasn't the only one holding it. That thought brought both relief and tension. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how long it would take, and I didn't know how he would react. But I knew one thing: this was no longer invisible. Later that day, I noticed something small. He was called into a meeting. It might have meant nothing, but something about the timing felt important. He walked past my desk without his usual confidence. For the first time, I saw something different in his expression. Not control, not certainty, something closer to uncertainty. And that told me everything was beginning to move. The next few days were quiet, too. Quiet. Nothing obvious changed, but small details started to stand out. He spoke less during meetings. He didn't linger at my desk anymore, and when he passed by, he didn't look at me the same way. It was subtle, but it was real. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. A coworker approached me near the hallway. "Hey," she said softly, "can I talk to you for a second?" We stepped aside. She hesitated for a moment, then looked at me carefully. "You're not the only one," she said. My heart paused. I didn't interrupt. She didn't go into details, but she didn't need to. I just thought, "You should know," she added. I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I said. As she walked away, I stood there for a moment. Everything felt clearer. This wasn't just my story. It was bigger than me, and that changed everything. After that conversation, the energy in the office felt different. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there. People were watching more closely. Conversations felt quieter when he entered the room, and he seemed to notice it. He still tried to act the same, but something had shifted. One morning, he corrected someone else in a meeting, but this time, his tone didn't carry the same weight. It felt forced, like something underneath had changed. Later, I noticed him being called into another meeting. Longer this time. When he returned, he looked different. Not confident, not relaxed, tense. For the first time, I realized something important. The control he once had wasn't solid, it was fragile, and now it was starting to crack. The investigation continued quietly but steadily. I was called in again for follow up questions. They were more detailed this time. Specific moments, exact wording, clarifications. I answered everything clearly. I didn't rush, I didn't guess. I stayed with the facts, and that made everything stronger. Each time I walked out of that room, I felt more certain. This wasn't being ignored, it was being taken seriously. Back at my desk, I focused on my work like usual, but inside, I could feel it. Something was building. The truth was no longer hidden, it was moving. And soon, it would reach a point where nothing could stop it. By the next week, the shift in the office was impossible to ignore. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was there in everything. Conversations slowed when he walked by. People avoided being alone with him. Even the way meetings felt had changed. He still showed up every day, but something about him was different. Quieter, more careful. One morning, he tried to correct my work again during a meeting. His tone was firm, but it didn't carry the same weight it once had. I stayed calm. I followed the guidelines exactly, I said, keeping my voice steady. "If there's something specific you want adjusted, I can review it." There was a pause. For a second, no one spoke. Then he nodded slightly and moved on. That moment was small, but it meant everything. For the first time, he didn't push back. For the first time, he didn't have control. And everyone in the room felt it. Later that day, I noticed something unusual. He was called into another meeting, but this one felt different. It lasted longer than the others. Hours passed, and he didn't return. People started noticing, is he still in there? Someone whispered. I think so, another replied quietly. The office felt tense, like everyone was waiting without saying it out loud. When he finally walked out, he didn't look at anyone. He walked straight past the desks, past the usual conversations, and headed for the exit. No words, no explanation, just silence. I watched him leave, my thoughts completely still. Something had changed, not just slightly, completely. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just another meeting. This was the turning point. The next morning, his desk was empty. No laptop, no papers, no sign that he had ever been there. At first, no one said anything. People just noticed quietly. Then the whispers started. Did he take leave? Was he transferred? Something feels off. But no one had answers. Around midday, HR sent a short message to the team. It didn't give details. It simply stated that he was no longer with the company. That was it. No explanation, no announcement, just a quiet ending. I read the message twice, not because I didn't understand it, but because it felt unreal. After everything that had happened, it was over, just like that. The office felt different that day, lighter. It wasn't something you could point to directly, but it was there. Conversations felt easier. People smiled more. The tension that had once filled the space was gone. I sat at my desk, staring at my screen, trying to process everything. For months, I had walked into this place feeling unsure, careful, and constantly aware of him. Now that weight was gone, completely. A coworker passed by and paused. You okay? She asked gently. I nodded. Yeah. And for the first time, I meant it. It wasn't just relief, it was something deeper. A sense of calm I hadn't felt in a long time. The space felt like mine again, and that feeling was something I would never take for granted. A few days later, I was called into HR again. This time, the atmosphere was different, calmer, more settled. They thanked me for coming forward. They didn't share every detail, but they made one thing clear. Action had been taken based on the information gathered, and it wasn't just my report. Others had spoken too. Hearing that made everything feel even more real. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never really had been. You did the right thing, one of them said. I nodded quietly. For a long time, I had wondered if speaking up would make things worse, but now I knew it hadn't. It had changed things, not just for me, for everyone. That same week, I received an email. At first, I thought it was just another update, but when I opened it, I paused. My name was on the promotion list. I read it once, then again, just to be sure. It felt strange, not because I didn't deserve it, but because of everything it represented for months. That opportunity had been held out of reach, not because of my work, but because of something unfair. Now it was back, restored, and this time it felt real, not influenced, not controlled, earned. I leaned back in my chair, letting that sink in. It wasn't just a title, it was proof. In the days that followed, the way people treated me changed. Not in a loud or obvious way, but in small, meaningful moments. A nod in the hallway, a quiet thank you, a little more respect in conversations. One coworker stopped by my desk and said, "I'm I'm glad things changed." I smiled slightly. Me too. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Some things didn't have to be said out loud. The understanding was already there, and that felt enough. Sometimes I thought back to the moment everything shifted. Um, the day I told him to stop, the way he had laughed, um, like nothing would happen, like I had no power. At the time, that laugh had made me feel small. Now it meant something else. It reminded me how wrong he had been. Power didn't always look loud. Sometimes it looked quiet, careful, patient, and when used the right way, it changed everything. Looking back, I realized something important. I had spent months feeling stuck, unsure, quiet, but the moment I chose to act, everything began to move. Not instantly, not easily, but steadily. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to fight loudly or prove anything through anger. I needed the truth. And the truth was enough. It exposed what needed to be seen. It changed what needed to change. And it gave me something I almost lost along the way, my voice. And this time, I knew I would never ignore it again. If you're watching this or listening right now and something in your life feels off, don't ignore it. I spent months telling myself it wasn't serious. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to cause problems. I thought if I just worked harder and stayed respectful, everything would get better on its own. It didn't. What changed everything wasn't anger or revenge. It was deciding that what I was going through actually mattered. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling, pay attention, keep track of what's happening, talk to someone you trust, learn your options. You don't have to go through it alone. And don't let anyone make you feel small just because they think they can. I thought I had no power. I was wrong. The moment I stood on the truth, everything started to change. So if you're in that place right now, hear this clearly. You're not overreacting, you're not imagining it, and you don't have to stay silent.